Dragon Quest is a storied Japanese RPG series in the world of video games, closing in on its 40th anniversary in 2026. The gaps between main entries, especially in the last 30 years, have been farther and farther apart. It's been more than 8 years since Dragon Quest XI, and we're still waiting for Dragon Quest XII. In those gaps, Square Enix has gotten into a habit of making remakes of older games. And now it's time to go all the way back to the beginning. Hot on the heels of last year's excellent HD-2D remake of Dragon Quest III comes Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake. All three of these games make up the Erdrick trilogy and have a connected story and world between them. That makes the pairing of Dragon Quest I and II in a single game make sense. They stand alone, but they're connected. Instead of standing alone in this review, Jordan Rudek and I, Neal Roddihan, are going to join forces to fight the Dragon Lord in a dual review. So Jordan, let's start with the first game here. What's your history with Dragon Quest I, and how do you feel about the new remake?
I'd be ashamed to admit that I never finished Dragon Warrior / Quest on the NES, despite being an avid fan and enjoyer of the OG Final Fantasy, if it weren't for how approachable and polished the HD remake of Dragon Quest I is. I've also dabbled in the Game Boy Color version and the mobile port that came to Switch in 2019. It was the DS and 3DS games that really pushed me into Dragon Quest fanhood, and my love for the series has only grown. You can count me among those who are thrilled to have modern iterations of the Erdrick trilogy, and after thoroughly enjoying the Dragon Quest III remake last year, my body was ready for Dragon Quest I and II HD 2D Remake. After finally finishing the first game, a long-standing quest of my own, I'm smack dab in the middle of cozy RPG country. It feels both faithful but also fleshed out and polished to an HD 2D shine. If I recall correctly, we also partnered up in reviewing the mobile trilogy that I touched on earlier. But how did you find the Dragon Quest I remake?
I was one of those young kids who just knew it as Dragon Warrior, since the NES cartridge for the original Western release made it into my collection sometime in the early 90s. I eventually finished it while I got older, but it was really a game that I learned a lot about early Japanese RPG mechanics, even if the genre didn't fully click with me initially. It's been a long time since I touched Dragon Quest I before the new remake, and I legitimately had to double check that the game didn't just wholesale change the entire thing because of how fleshed out and full the game felt. A ton of story and lore is peppered in throughout what was originally more a cut and dry experience. Dragon Quest I's HD 2D remake is still the original game through and through, but it makes it incredibly approachable and modern. They didn't go for a shot-for-shot remake here, but this doesn't change the vibes and fundamentals. The classic story, traditional turn-based combat, and memorable score are all there, emboldened by new technology and development. It's not without its warts, though. The combat with a single party member can wear thin and frustrating over time. There are some changes here where now there's more than one enemy per battle and you have spells that can attack groups of enemies. But overall, the original Dragon Quest is a hugely important video game, and this is an incredible way to experience that history. Also, I love the varied difficulty settings. You can rock a normal difficulty or make it easier or harder. It's nice to have options. Anything else to add on the Dragon Quest I remake?
I'll just throw in that I loved feeling like an absolute powerhouse of a unit by the end of the game. My thoroughness in searching for scrolls and treasure chests throughout the adventure turned into a worthwhile reward. The way that the characters you encounter truly revere, admire, and love you really got to me by the time I had rolled credits. But now we get to turn our attention to the Dragon Quest II remake, and I can safely say I have even less experience with this game. That meant going through the remake was effectively a maiden voyage for me. Maybe you can fill in some of the background here for us, Neal?
My only experience with Dragon Quest II was in the Switch port back in 2019. I appreciated the opportunity to play the game back then, because I'd never really done it before, but I think I summed it best when I ended that review with, quote, Dragon Quest II isn't a bad game, it's just 32 years old and might be the weakest entry in one of the most legendary RPG franchises of all time. Now, Jordan, do you still find that to be the case with the new HD 2D remake?
Yes and no. I find my enjoyment of the game coming in waves. At points the pacing is pretty awful, but there are some genuinely touching moments. and the new character, the Princess of Canuck, is delightful. Other new features include mini medals, ability granting scrolls, and the Tombola minigame, all of which are welcome changes. An undersea area accessed later in the game brings welcome depth, pun intended, to the world and the story. The way this remake has been treated appears to acknowledge the rough edges of the original and situate that imperfect shape within a fuller, more attractive shell. So not just lipstick on a pig, but more like a total makeover of a pig. While it's easier to see the failings of the game when you compare it against the first and third titles in the series, there's no denying that the remake treatment makes it a more than competent RPG. I'm looking ahead a little bit, but certain moments like the post-game had me cheering and booing in equal measure. I think I just sounded like I have split personalities here. Did the additions and changes of the remake help redeem Dragon Quest II in your eyes?
The biggest surprise is how much these games just feel brand new. They are still the original games from the 1980s at their core, but all the story expansions, visual flourishes, and gameplay refinement make them feel fresh. These are the types of remakes and revisits I want to see. It's not changing what these games were, but it's updating them and making them more palpable to a wider modern audience. That being said, you are 100% right at some of the encounter rates, specifically in Dragon Quest II. Maybe I'm just spoiled by other remasters and remakes making encounter rate flexible or toggleable, but it was a very vintage old RPG, quote, go to battle seemingly every 2 steps. That stands out amidst the sea of other changes, even if I guess you can kick it to Draki Quest, the easiest difficulty that makes it so you can never die, to remedy some of that. These remakes are still incredible for what they are, a loving update to 2 hugely important and influential RPGs. Some of the warts are just what these games were when they were made nearly 40 years ago. So as we wrap up, any parting thoughts on Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D?
Even if Dragon Quest III is the narrative starting point for the trilogy, it was Dragon Quest I that came out first almost 40 years ago. And the remake is an incredible entry point for the series and for RPGs in general. Like you said, the changes and refinements are thoughtful and meaningful, making it so longtime fans, too, can see the reverence that the developers have for the original games. With another remake coming early next year for Dragon Quest VII, we're experiencing an embarrassment of riches during the long wait for Dragon Quest XII, but it's easy to be patient with Square Enix hitting it out of the park with these HD 2D versions. It's an easy recommendation for me for the reasons we've discussed, but have we settled on a final score?
I do believe we have, and it's a pretty good score. These are good games. Enjoy. Stay Dragon Questing.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.